It is right there.
That historical antecedent. Second, it is simply astonishing how much weight is being put on this when, in fact, we're starting to know what they can possibly agree to. They can't agree to land swaps without Ukraine there because Ukraine has said we're not interested in any of those. They can't agree on future security provisions for Ukraine, either from outside, from European members or from NATO, or interior. I'm sure Mr. Putin has in mind negotiating restrictions on Ukraine's self-defense capabilities. So it's very difficult to know what can possibly come of this. And as I think NewsNation has properly emphasized, these pictures, this fact of Mr. Putin landing on American soil is a tremendous victory going in. If nothing else comes out of this but those pictures, but the fact that Mr. Putin's isolation has ended, as Zelensky rather ruefully noted, this is already a tremendous success, this semi-summit for Russia.
I was thinking the same thing, George, as we were watching this on the screen, is that the very pictures that were unfolding were in and of themselves, no matter what happens, a victory in Putin's mind. We're told by the pool report that both ignored questions being yelled by pool reporters on the tarmac, but that Putin, it said here, shrugged when he was asked if he will stop killing innocent civilians. George.
Well, killing innocent civilians happens to be his war plan. That is, he's not made much progress for 3 years at a cost of 1 million men killed or wounded against the armed forces of Ukraine. Remember, Russia planned to have a victory parade in Kiev 2 months after they invaded. The invading troops were told by their commanders in Moscow to bring along their dress uniforms because they would be needed for the victory parade. This hasn't gone well for Mr. Putin. All his expectations have been terrible. So the question now is, what can he do to redeem this terrible sacrifice? Since they're not making great progress.
What do you make of them riding along, I'm sorry to interrupt, in the Beast, the presidential limo, together, it appears? So that shot, right, guys? Is that what we just saw, riding by and laughing in the back seat together in the president's limousine?
The optics are terrible. The optics are the president of the United States giving a kind of moral equivalence to the man who's caused all this with an act of naked, unprovoked aggression. It's not a pretty picture right now, and it's quite difficult to see what can possibly be agreed to that would redeem the effect of these pictures and the fact that Mr. Putin's isolation has ended.
When you think of the history of just these two gentlemen, everybody goes back to Helsinki in 2018, which may very well have been one of, if not the low point, at least on foreign policy of that Trump presidency of the first term for what came out, especially of that joint news conference after their summit on foreign soil. It's remembered, as you know, for a president of the United States essentially appearing to side with Vladimir Putin over his own intelligence community. That was the story everywhere after that. I think we asked before this what lessons had been learned going into today, and quite frankly, the tone of President Trump had been different in recent weeks, seemed more critical, more skeptical of Putin, and now we see this. How do you work all that together?
Well, remember, the fundamental fact about Donald Trump is, and some people like this, and some people think it's a good negotiating tactic, but the fact is he's mercurial. That is, he is changeable. More crimes, carving up a third democratic nation. The word comes to historical antecedent. Second, it is simply astonishing how much weight is being put on this when, in fact, we're starting to know what they can possibly agree to. They can't agree to land swaps without Ukraine there because Ukraine has said we're not interested in any of those. They can't agree on future security provisions for Ukraine, either from outside, from European members or from NATO, or interior. I'm sure Mr. Putin has in mind negotiating restrictions on Ukraine's self-defense capabilities. So it's very difficult to know what can possibly come of this. And as I think NewsNation has properly emphasized, these pictures, this fact of Mr. Putin landing on American soil is a tremendous victory going in. If nothing else comes out of this but those pictures, but the fact that Mr. Putin's isolation has ended, as Zelensky rather ruefully noted, this is already a tremendous success, this semi-summit for Russia.
I was thinking the same thing, George, as we were watching this on the screen, is that the very pictures that were unfolding were in and of themselves, no matter what happens, a victory in Putin's mind. We're told by the pool report that both ignored questions being yelled by pool reporters on the tarmac, but that Putin, it said here, shrugged when he was asked if he will stop killing innocent civilians. George.
Well, killing innocent civilians happens to be his war plan. That is, he's not made much progress for 3 years at a cost of 1 million men killed or wounded against the armed forces of Ukraine. Remember, Russia planned to have a victory parade in Kiev 2 months after they invaded. The invading troops were told by their commanders in Moscow to bring along their dress uniforms because they would be needed for the victory parade. This hasn't gone well for Mr. Putin. All his expectations have been terrible. So the question now is, what can he do to redeem this terrible sacrifice? Since they're not making great progress.
What do you make of them riding along, I'm sorry to interrupt, in the Beast, the presidential limo, together, it appears? So that shot, right, guys? Is that what we just saw, riding by and laughing in the back seat together in the president's limousine?
The optics are terrible. The optics are the President of the United States giving a kind of moral equivalence to the man who's caused all this with an act of naked, unprovoked aggression. It's not a pretty picture right now.
At the American Enterprise Institute, Chris Steyerwalt. Hello, brother.
How are you?
Doing well.
Happy Summit Friday.
Yes, sir. So much symbolism.
Yeah.
I mean, just if you take the first like 5 minutes of this, we have no idea what's being said behind closed doors. Maybe we never will. Maybe we will. Who knows? I don't know. But you saw Trump and Putin shake hands.
Right.
Walk down a red carpet with fighter jets escorting them.
Right.
As that happens, a B-2 bomber buzzes over Putin's head. Trump then stands on a stage with him and brings him into the Beast.
Right.
And I'm going, what's going on here with all this messaging?
Well, it looked like Trump was treating him, and he's small in stature compared to Trump, which Trump always enjoys whenever he can lord himself over another mammal. But Trump was sort of displaying him like he was a fish, a halibut that he had pulled out of Prince William Sound, that he was saying like, I've got him and he's here. Now, I'm sure that for the Ukrainians, this is a sickening sight. Yeah. This butcher, this war criminal
wants a piece of this, you better deal. And I guess the other side of that is if you don't come to the table, then we rain all those sanctions on top of you. Let me ask you though, the team, Rubio and Witkoff, the first summit in Helsinki, they were one-on-one.
Yeah.
There were a lot of questions, both sides of the aisle, about that being the decision. This time around, it's different.
Well, Trump is different too. He was at a low point in his first term when he went, and he was under the cloud of the allegations, some real, some fake, about what Russia had done to interfere in the 2016 election. And that was the dominant motif of his first term. And I don't know how much a part that was of the bad performance he turned in there and how poorly that summit went for the United States. Democrats are shattered. Donald Trump is ascendant. He's rolling troops through the District of Columbia. He's having his way with everything. Trump is sort of on a high. I think that's probably as significant as anything in this, is that a greater degree of confidence and surety for Trump potentially produces a different result. The other potentially different result is, I don't know about Witkoff. Right. Nobody knows about Witkoff and how pliant he is. Rubio does have a reputation as a hawk that he would probably want to defend.
All right, interesting. Catch you later in the show. We're going to be rocking and rolling all night.
I feel it. Yep. Here it comes.
Chris Steyerwalt, thank you, sir.
nothing set in stone. I want certain things. I want to see a ceasefire. This is not to do with Europe. Europe's not telling me what to do. But they're going to be involved in the process, obviously, as well as Zelensky. But I want to see a ceasefire rapidly. I don't know if it's going to be today, but I'm not going to be happy if it's not today. Everyone said it can't be today, but I'm just saying I want the killing to stop. I'm in this to stop the killing. You know, we're not putting up any money. We're making money. They're buying our weapons, and we're sending them to NATO, and NATO's sending us big, beautiful checks. But I don't care about that. I care about, it was a big factor when Biden spent $350 billion and got nothing. But what I do care about is they lost last week 7,011 people were lost, almost all soldiers. 36 people in a town which got hit by a missile. But over 7,000 soldiers. It's crazy.
Can you describe a little bit, Mr. President, because I know you've had a lot of phone calls with President Putin. What's the difference in a face-to-face, in-person meeting?
No different. Look, he's a smart guy. Been doing it for a long time, but so have I. Been doing it for a long time. And here we are, we're president. And that was much more difficult than what I'm doing today, believe me. So we get along. There's a good respect level on both sides, and I think, you know, something's going to come of it. I noticed he's bringing a lot of business people from Russia, and that's good. I like that because they want to do business, but they're not doing business until we get the war settled.
Are you going to talk about business?
They need business. We have the hottest country on earth. We have the hottest economy on earth. We have the hottest country. We just set a new stock market record again. We have hundreds of billions of dollars flowing in from tariffs. We're the hottest country. We were a dead country, but dead like doornails, a dead country. 1 year ago, we were dead as a doornail, and now we have the hottest country. And he wants a piece of that because his country is not hot economically. In fact, it's the opposite. And China's not doing well economically, but we're all, look, I want everybody to do well. The war's going to stop and the killing's going to stop.
Mr. President, what do you mean by severe consequences? To take questions. We saw that Russia continued its violence into Ukraine last night, launching even more drones. What did you make of that?
Well, I think they're trying to negotiate. He's trying to set a stage. I mean, in his mind, that helps him make a better deal. It actually hurts him. But in his mind, that helps him make a better deal if they could continue the killing. Maybe it's a part of the world. Maybe it's just his fabric, his genes, his genetics. But he thinks that makes him, gives him strength in negotiating. I think it hurts him, but I'll be talking to him about it.
And on the table for discussions today, Mr. President, are the territorial swaps on the table? Will you be discussing that?
They'll be discussed, but I've got to let Ukraine make that decision. And I think they'll make a proper decision. But I'm not here to negotiate for Ukraine. I'm here to get them at a table. And I think you have two sides. Look, Vladimir Putin wanted to take all of Ukraine. If I wasn't president, he would right now be taking all of Ukraine. But he's not going to do it.
Mr. President, what did you
Just one thing. What about
Don't underestimate that either.
the possibility of the United States providing security guarantees to Ukraine?
Maybe. Along with Europe and other countries. Not in the form of NATO, because that's not going to, you know, there are certain things that aren't going to happen. But, yeah, along with Europe, there's a possibility.
You mentioned the number of business people that President Putin is bringing along. Is that something that you want to discuss with President Putin at this meeting?
Yeah, if we make progress, I would discuss it, because that's one of the things that they would like. They'd like to get a piece of what I built in terms of the economy. Just so you know, we were a dead country with our economy. He wouldn't be interested. He wouldn't have been interested a year ago with the Biden economy. But he is interested in the Trump economy because we're doing. Wait till you see when those factories start opening up. We have hundreds of factories all over the country, and that includes auto factories, AI factories, and every other. They're all coming in because they want to beat the tariffs. Because if they open here, they don't have to pay tariffs. If they don't open here, they have to pay, in some cases, 200%, 300%. I haven't even set some of the tariffs yet. I'll be setting tariffs next week and the week after on steel and on, I would say, chips.
Steel higher
Chips and semiconductors will be setting sometime next week, week after.
What rate are you looking at? What rate?
Well, I'm going to have a rate that is going to be lower at the beginning. Then that gives them a chance to come in and build, and very high after a certain period of time. And if they don't build here, they have to pay a very high tariff, which doesn't work, so they'll come and build.
Mr. President, you had said earlier.
He's a gentleman.
He didn't do that with me.
Isn't he a gentleman? He's a nice.
He's helping me out.
He's a very nice. He's one of the few nice ones. Yeah.
You had said earlier this week that Putin would face severe consequences if you get the sense from him that he's not interested. What do you mean by that?
Economically severe. Yes, it will be very severe. I'm not doing this for my health. Okay, I don't need it. I'd like to focus on our country, but I'm doing this to save a lot of lives. Yeah, very severe. Thank you very much, everybody.
The announcement, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, side by side, Anchorage, Alaska. As we watch and listen live here on NewsNation, I thank you for being with us tonight.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, our negotiations have been held in a constructive atmosphere of mutual respect. We had very thorough negotiations that were quite useful. I would like to thank once again my American counterpart for the proposal to travel out here to Alaska. It only makes sense that we've met here because our countries, though separated by the oceans, are close neighbors. So when we've met, when I came out of the plane and I've said, "Good afternoon, dear neighbor, very good to see you, in good health, and to see you alive," I think that is very neighborly. And I think that's some kind words that we can say to each other. We're separated by the Strait of Bering, though there are 2 islands only between the Russian island and the U.S. island. They're only 4 kilometers apart. We're close neighbors, and it's a fact. It's also important that Alaska has to do with our common heritage, common history between Russia and the U.S., and many positive events have to do with that territory. Still, there is tremendous cultural heritage back from the Russian America. For example, Orthodox churches and a lot of more than 700 geographical names of Russian origin. During the Second World War, it was here in Alaska that was the origin of the legendary air bridge for the supply of military aircraft and other equipment under the Lend-Lease program. It was a dangerous and treacherous route over the vast emptiness of ice. However, the pilots of both countries did everything to bring closer the victory. They risked their lives and they gave it all for the common victory. I was just in the city of Magadan in Russia, and there is a memorial there dedicated to the Russian and the U.S. pilots. And there are 2 flags, the U.S. flag and the Russian flag. And I know that here as well there is such a memorial. There is a military burial place several kilometers away from here. The Soviet pilots that buried there who died during that dangerous mission. We're thankful to the citizens and the government of the U.S. for carefully taking care of their memory. I think that's very worthy and noble. We'll always remember other historical examples when our countries defeated common enemies together in the spirit of battle camaraderie and allyship that supported each other and facilitated each other. I'm sure that this heritage will help us rebuild and foster mutually beneficial and equal ties at this new stage, even during the hardest conditions. It is known that there have been no summits between Russia and the U.S. for 4 years, and that's a long time. This time was very hard for bilateral relations, and let's be frank, they've fallen to the lowest point since the Cold War. I think that's not benefiting our countries and the world as a whole. It is apparent that sooner or later, we had to amend the situation to move on from the confrontation to dialogue. And in this case, a personal meeting between the heads of state has been long overdue, naturally under the condition of serious and painstaking work. And this work has been done in general. Me and President Trump have very good direct contact. We've spoken multiple times. We spoke frankly on the phone. And Special Envoy of the president, Mr. Witkoff traveled out to Russia several times. Our advisors and heads of foreign ministries kept in touch all the time. And you know fully well that one of the central issues was the situation around Ukraine. We see the strive of the administration and President Trump personally to help facilitate the resolution of the Ukrainian conflict. And his strive to get to the crux of the matter, to understand this history, is precious. As I've said, the situation in Ukraine has to do with fundamental threats to our security. Moreover, we've always considered the Ukrainian nation, and I've said it multiple times, a brotherly nation, however strange it may sound in these conditions. We have the same roots, and everything that's happening is a tragedy for us and terrible wound. Therefore, the country is sincerely interested in putting an end to it. At the same time, we're convinced that in order to make the settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate all the primary roots, the primary causes of that conflict, and we've said it multiple times, to consider all legitimate concerns of Russia and to reinstate a just balance of security in Europe and in the world on the whole. And I agree with President Trump, as he has said today, that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Naturally, we are prepared to work on that. I would like to hope that the agreement that we've reached together will help us bring closer that goal and will pave the path towards peace in Ukraine. We expect that Kiev and European capitals will perceive that constructively and that they won't throw a wrench in the works. They will not make any attempts to use some backroom dealings to conduct provocations to torpedo the nascent progress. Incidentally, when the new administration came to power, bilateral trade started to grow. It's still very symbolic. Still, we have a growth of 20%. As I've said, we have a lot of dimensions for joint work. It is clear that the U.S. and Russian investment and business cooperation has tremendous potential. Russia and the U.S. can offer each other so much in trade, digital, high-tech, and in space exploration. We see that Arctic cooperation is also very possible. And our international context, for example, between the Far East of Russia and the West Coast of the U.S. Overall, it's very important for our countries to turn the page, to go back to cooperation. It is symbolic that not far away from here, the border between Russia and the U.S., there is a so-called international date line. I think you can step over, literally, from yesterday into tomorrow. And I hope we'll succeed in that. In political sphere. I would like to thank President Trump for our joint work, for the well-wishing and trustworthy tone of our conversation. It's important that both sides are result-oriented, and we see that the President of the U.S. has a very clear idea of what he would like to achieve. He sincerely cares about prosperity of his nation. Still, he understands that Russia has its own national interests. I expect that today's agreements will be the starting point, not only for the solution of the Ukrainian issue, but also will help us bring back business-like and pragmatic relations between Russia and the U.S. And in the end, I would like to add one more thing. I'd like to remind you that in 2022, during the last contact with the previous administration, I tried to convince my previous American colleague that the situation should not be brought to the point of no return when it would come to hostilities. And I said it quite directly back then that it's a big mistake. Today, when President Trump is saying that if he was the president back then, there will be no war. And I'm quite sure that it would indeed be so. I can confirm that. I think that overall, me and President Trump have built a very good, business-like and trustworthy contact. And I have every reason to believe that moving down this path, we can come, and the sooner the better, to the end of the conflict in Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. That was very profound, and I will say that I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones, that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Ratcliffe, thank you very much. But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here, and I think, you know, everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time, and we look forward to that. We look forward to dealing. We're going to try and get this over with. We really made some great progress today. I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir. We had many tough meetings, good meetings. We were interfered with by the Russia hoax. That made it a little bit tougher to deal with, but he understood it. I think he's probably seen things like that during the course of his career. He's seen it all. But we had to put up with the Russia hoax. He knew it was a hoax, and I knew it was a hoax. But what was done was very criminal. But it made it harder for us to deal as a country in terms of the business and all of the things that we'd like to have dealt with. But we'll have a good chance when this is over. So just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin and his entire team, whose faces, who I know in many cases, other than that, whose faces I get to see all the time in the newspapers. You're almost as famous as the boss, but especially this one right over here. But we had some good meetings over the years, right? Good, productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed, and President Putin wants to see that as much as I do. So, again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.